The rope burn was still fresh on my wrists the morning they brought her to my camp. I heard her before I saw her, not crying. I want to be clear about that, because plenty of men in my position would have expected crying. What I heard was the creak of wagon wheels stopping too sudden, and then a voice, sharp and low, saying, "I am not a bundle of trade goods, Mr. Harlow." I was sharpening my knife outside the lodge. I kept sharpening it. Colonel Harlow had been trying to negotiate peace on this stretch of the Powder country for 3 months. He'd tried cattle. He'd tried silver. He'd tried making promises his government had no intention of keeping. I knew that before he did, probably. And now he was trying this. A marriage between a Lakota war chief and the daughter of the most stubborn homesteader on the Eastern Ridge. A man who'd broken 3 separate treaties just by us building his fence line where he'd built it. Margaret Ann Calloway stepped down from that wagon herself. Didn't wait for a hand. She was wearing a dress the color of old creek water, green gone gray, and her hair was pinned up but coming loose on one side. Like she'd fought the whole ride here and her hair had surrendered even if she hadn't. She looked at me straight. I looked back. Harlow cleared his throat. "Red Wolf, this is. I heard what you said," I told him, in English, which I suspect surprised him, because men like Harlow always assume that if you don't speak first, you don't understand. I stood up. I am not a small man. Knew what I looked like to her. I'd seen white women flinch before, and I was watching for it. She didn't flinch. What she did was lift her chin about 1/4 of an inch like she was bracing for weather. That, right there. That 1/4 inch. That's what started everything. The first 3 days we did not speak. This wasn't cruelty on my part. People who don't know the Lakota way think silence is coldness. It isn't. Silence is respect. You don't fill air with noise, just to prove you're comfortable. You sit with a thing until you understand it. I understood that Margaret Ann Calloway was terrified and furious in equal measure, and that the fury was holding the terror back like a dam holds a river, and that if I pushed either one, the fear or the anger, the dam would break, and neither of us would be the better for it. So I left food at the entrance to her section of the lodge. Rabbit stew, the first night. The 3rd morning she came out while I was tending the horses, and stood about 15 feet away, watching me work, and I didn't look up, and after a while she said, "You're doing that wrong." I stopped. Looked at the knot I'd been tying. "My father raises horses," she said. That rapple slipped by midday. She was right. I held out the rope without a word. She came close enough to take it, and her hands moved quick and certain, reworking the tie. She smelled like wood smoke and something else. Lavender, maybe, that she must have tucked in her bag before they dragged her here. "There," she said, and stepped back. Back to her 15 feet. "Thank you," I said. Also in English. She looked like she hadn't expected that either. What no one had told her, what no one, I think, had thought she needed to know, was that I had a son. His name was Chayton. He was 4 years old. His mother, Winona, had died the previous winter from the fever that swept through our camp like a hand sweeping crumbs off a table. Fast, indifferent, gone. Chayton still looked for her sometimes. I'd watch him turn toward the door of the lodge at the time she used to come back from the creek, Keent. And then he'd remember, and the remembering was written plain on his 4-year-old face. And there was nothing in this world, or any other world, that I could do about it. I was not looking for another wife. I was looking for something that would make my son stop turning toward that door. Harlow hadn't mentioned any of this in his negotiation. Tells you everything about what Harlow thought the purpose of women was. Margaret Ann found out about Chayton on the 4th day. When he crawled out from behind a supply bundle where he'd been hiding and watching her. He'd been doing that for days. I'd known. I said nothing, because curiosity is not a thing you interrupt in a child. And she turned and found herself face to face with a pair of dark eyes at knee height. She went very still. Chayton said in Lakota, "Your hair is the color of the red grass in autumn." I didn't translate. She must have read something in his face, because she slowly knelt down to his level. They looked at each other for a long moment. The boy, and then he reached out and touched one of the loose pieces of her hair. Just with one finger, gently, like he was checking if it was real. She let him. I had to turn away and find something to do with myself near the horses. The thing about grief nobody tells you is that it doesn't announce itself politely. It doesn't knock on the door and wait. It comes in through cracks. The smell of a particular wood burning. A song someone hums without knowing. The weight of a sleeping child pressed against your side. I was 31 years old. I had fought in 3 conflicts I did not start. I had buried my father, my wife, 2 men who were brothers to me in everything but blood. I had sat in council with men who lied to my face, with the ease of breathing, and then ridden home feeling righteous. I was tired in a way that sleep did not touch. I want you to understand this because of what happened on the 9th night. There was a storm coming in. The sky went that particular green-yellow that the planes get, that before something serious rolls through. And I was securing the horses when I heard her behind me. "I'm not afraid of storms," she said. "In case you were going to send me inside." "I wasn't going to send you anywhere," I said. She stood beside me, not in my way, just near enough that I could have passed her a rope if I'd needed to. We worked in silence. The wind picked up. Hair came all the way down from its pins finally. She'd given up fighting it, I think, and it blew sideways and she just let it. When the horses were settled and the first real drops were hitting, we ran for the lodge, and we stood just inside the entrance while the storm broke open above us, lightning forking white across the sky over the hills, thunder rolling through the ground beneath our feet. She was breathing hard from the run. So was I. "My mother hated storms," she said. Out of nowhere. She'd get under the bed with the dog. A pause. I thought that was funny when I was small. Now I understand it. Another pause, shorter. Understanding things you used to laugh at. That's a particular kind of growing up, isn't it? I thought about Winona, about the things I understood now that I'd been too young and too proud to understand when she was alive. "Yes," I said. "It is." We stood there listening to the rain. Not touching, shoulder width apart. But something had shifted, quiet as a door swinging on a well-oiled hinge, and I think we both felt it. She asked me about Winona on the 12th day. Not rudely. Not the way curious white women sometimes ask about Lakota things, like they were inquiring about an interesting custom they'd read of in a pamphlet. She asked the way you ask about something that matters. Carefully, with the understanding that she might be stepping somewhere tender. "Chayton calls out a name sometimes," she said. At night, I didn't want to ask him. "Winona," I said. "His mother." She waited. "She died last winter." Margaret Ann was quiet for a moment. Then, "I lost my mother when I was 11. She looked out past the lodge entrance at the hills. You never really stop expecting them." That's what I remember. It wasn't the sadness so much as the surprise of it. Every morning you wake up, and for just 1 second you forget. And then you remember, and that second is she stopped. Shook her head. "I don't have the right word." "In our language," I said slowly, "there is a word. Kante Sakaya. It means the heart made sorrowful." "But the literal meaning." I paused, because I was translating something that does not translate well. The literal meaning is closer to the heart that has learned something it wishes it didn't know. She turned and looked at me. "Yes," she said, quietly, "that's exactly it. I should tell you about the afternoon 3 weeks in. Because it was the afternoon I understood. I was in serious trouble. She had taken it upon herself to teach Chayton English words. I don't know when this started. Gradually, the way rivers change course, a little at a time. I was coming back from the creek and I heard her voice, and then his laughter, and I stopped walking before I reached the lodge because I needed a moment. She was holding up objects and saying the English word, and he was repeating them back in a voice about half an octave higher than hers, and twice as enthusiastic, and when he got one right, she'd say perfect, and he'd repeat perfect back at her and dissolve into giggles, and she was laughing too. Not the careful, polite kind of laugh I'd heard from her in company, but the real kind, surprised out of her, head tilted back. I don't know how long I stood there. Long enough to know that whatever I'd built around myself in the months since Winona died, the silence, the distance, the absolute certainty that I did not need anyone, that I was made of harder material than want and loneliness, was not as solid as I'd believed. It had been, I realized, a particular kind of lie I'd told myself. The kind you tell, not because you believe it, but because you need it to be true. She got sick in the 5th week. Nothing serious. A fever. The kind that comes from weather change and exhaustion and sleeping somewhere new. She slept for 2 days. And on the first night I sat outside, the entrance to her sleeping space, and listened to her breathing, because I could not do anything else, and because the sound of difficult breathing in the night had already cost me more than I could say, and I refused to let it take anything more. Chayton found me there. He crawled into my lap without asking. He never asked, he just arrived, which had always been his way, and pressed his small back against my chest, and we sat there together in the dark, listening. "She'll be okay," he told me, in Lakota. He was 4. He didn't actually know this, but children say the true thing sometimes even when they have no reason to. "Yes," I said. "She will." She was better by the second morning. When she woke up and found a bowl of water and a cloth and dried herbs beside her, she called out to me, and I came to the entrance, and she held up the herbs. "Who?" "Sleep," I said. She looked at me for a moment. Voice, when she was just woken from a sick sleep, was rougher, lower. Her hair was all loose and tangled, and there were shadows under her eyes, and I thought she was the most real-looking person I had seen in a very long time. Everything about her was unguarded right then. She hadn't had time to put any distance up. "You didn't sleep," she said. She could tell. I don't know how. "Sleep now," I said. She held my eyes for another second, then, "Thank you, Red Wolf." First time she'd used my name. I went and stood with the horses for a while after that. I will tell you the thing I have not told anyone, because this is that kind of story, and you deserve the truth of it. I was not a feared war chief because I wanted to be feared. I was feared because I had learned, young and painfully, that the world gave you 2 choices: be seen as dangerous or be seen as manageable. And I had watched what happened to men who were seen as manageable. I had watched them be negotiated away. I had watched their land taken and their families scattered and their words twisted in the mouths of men like Harlow until the words meant something different than they'd said. So I had made myself into something that required more effort to dismiss. But inside that, underneath the reputation and the silence and the years of holding my face still in council when I wanted to put my fist through a table, I was just a man who had loved a woman and lost her, and was trying to raise her son without her, and who was desperately, privately, ashamed of how much he missed being known by someone. Really known, not respected, not feared, just known. Margaret Ann Calloway figured this out before I told her. She was sharp that way. Sharper than anyone I had met in a long time. On the 38th day. I know it was the 38th because I had been counting, without admitting to myself why I was counting. She came and sat beside me in the evening while Chayton slept, and she said, "Want to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly." "I will." "Were you lonely before I came here?" I was quiet for long enough that the answer was probably obvious. Then, "Yes. Me too," she said simply. My father's house was full of silence of a different kind. Not the kind that means peace. The kind that means everyone is being careful. She was looking at the fire. I was looking at her looking at the fire. "I don't know what this is," she said. "I don't know what I'm supposed to call it, or where it's supposed to go." She paused. "But I've stopped wanting to leave. My heart did something I hadn't felt it do in a considerable time." "I've stopped wanting you to," I said. She turned, found my face. Were close enough that I could see the firelight moving in her eyes, the way it made them shift between amber and dark. I reached up and very slowly tucked that one piece of hair back behind her ear. The one that was always coming loose. The one I'd been not touching for 38 days. She let out a breath, and then she leaned forward and rested her forehead against my jaw. Not a kiss, not yet, just that. The way you set something down carefully when you've been carrying it a long time. I put my arms around her. She made a sound I can only describe as see someone who has been bracing against the wind finally being allowed to stop. We stayed like that for a long time. The fire burned down. Somewhere on the ridge an owl called twice and went quiet. I am not going to tell you that everything was simple after that. This is not that kind of story, and the plains are not that kind of place. Father came to get her in the spring. He arrived with two of Harlow's men and a look on his face like a man who'd already decided how the conversation was going to go. She walked out to meet him. I stood behind her, at a distance, because she hadn't asked me to stand beside her, and because I understood, in a way that had cost me considerable internal argument to arrive at, that this was her battle to have. I heard her say, "I'm staying, Papa." I heard him start to argue. I heard her quietly say something I couldn't make out. Her voice dropped. And then there was a long silence. And then her father looked past her at me, and I looked back at him, and something passed between us. Not warmth, not yet, maybe not ever entirely, but something. An acknowledgement. A man looking at another man who loves his daughter, recognizing it even when he doesn't want to. He left before sundown, without her. That evening, after Chayton was asleep, Margaret Ann came and found me, and didn't say anything at all. Tease. She just put her hand in mine and stood with me, watching the last of the light go off the hills. The sky turning that deep particular blue that comes after all the orange burns out. Her hand was smaller than mine. She didn't hold it the way someone holds a thing they're uncertain of. She held it the way you hold something you've decided is yours. I thought about Winona. I think I will always think about Winona. But I have learned, and this is something I could only have learned the hard way, there is no easy way to learn it. That loving someone who is gone does not mean you have used up your capacity to love. The heart is not a jar that empties, it is something else. Something that grows maybe, something that keeps making room. I held her hand back. Above us, the first star came out. Chayton, who was supposed to be asleep, called from inside. "Is Margaret staying again tonight?" She laughed. That real laugh. "Yes," I called back. "She's staying. And I meant it the way you mean things when you're done, pretending they're uncertain. I meant it permanently. People ask me sometimes, much later, when things are different and the world is still not perfect, but we are still here in it. People ask me what I think love is. I tell them I think love is the decision to stay curious about someone, to keep wanting to know them, resist the very natural human instinct to decide you already understand a person and stop paying attention. Margaret Ann Calloway. Margaret Ann Running Bear, eventually, in a ceremony her father attended and didn't entirely ruin, she kept surprising me. Every year, she kept surprising me. That quality she had on the first day, that quarter-inch lift of the chin, that refusal to be a settled question, she never lost it. Chayton grew up. He learned both languages better than either of us. He taught his own children the Lakota word for grief. The river country changed around us in ways that broke my heart. I will not pretend otherwise. Every morning I woke up and she was there, warm and real, and exactly herself. And every morning for 37 years, that was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything.